Picture a Galilean hillside in spring, grass speckled with wildflowers, a sea of faces turned upward. You can almost hear the murmur of a restless crowd, Roman soldiers patrolling distant roads, Jewish farmers hoping for liberation. This is no ordinary lecture. Jesus ascends the mountain like Moses, but he sits to teach as a rabbi. Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. Seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when seated his disciples came. The mountain itself is a symbol. Sinai gave the law. This hill gives grace, a new covenant written on hearts. Roman occupation pressed heavy taxes and brutal crosses. The crowd longs for a Messiah who will break the yoke. But Jesus does not raise a sword. He opens his mouth and speaks words that sound like foolishness to power. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The first beatitude shatters expectations. The Greek word here is ptokos, not just poor, but beggarly, someone who crouches and cowers with empty hands. It means total spiritual bankruptcy, acknowledging you have nothing to offer God but your dire need. To the Roman mind, the powerful were blessed. To the Jew, the obedient were blessed. Jesus blesses the empty. The Beatitudes are not a list of virtues to achieve. They are a portrait of the citizens of the kingdom. And note, Jesus speaks present tense. Theirs is the kingdom, not will be. The kingdom has already broken in. This is the new Sinai, a mountain where God's voice speaks not from thunder, but from the lips of a man. The crowd sits on the grass, the same grass that fed the 5,000, and they hear a law written on hearts. Imagine the tension. Zealots might be in the crowd, waiting for the call to arms. Instead, they hear, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Jesus redefines victory, not conquest of Rome, but meekness inheriting the earth. The word pros means power under control. This is a radical manifesto that topples every throne of pride and self-sufficiency. The Beatitudes are an upside-down kingdom. The last are first, the empty are full, the mourners are comforted. And this sermon begins on a mountain because the new lawgiver is greater than Moses. Matthew constantly echoes the Exodus. Jesus comes out of Egypt, passes through water, spends 40 days in the wilderness. Now on this mountain, he delivers the constitution of the new covenant people, the Beatitudes. The crowds are astonished because he teaches with authority, not like the scribes who quote other rabbis. The word exousia, authority, emanates from him. He does not say, "Thus says the Lord." He says, "I say to you." Here is what most people miss. The Beatitudes are not commands. They are declarations of how the world really is in God's kingdom. Jesus is not saying, "Try to be meek." He is saying, "If you are meek, you are blessed because the earth is yours." This is the foundation of the entire Sermon on the Mount, a new reality that requires new eyes to see. And this mountain itself becomes the stage for the most revolutionary teaching ever spoken to humanity. Picture the scene, a hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee, crowded with thousands of weary souls. They have come from Galilee, from Decapolis, from Jerusalem, a microcosm of a broken nation under Roman heels. Jesus climbs the slope, and as he sits, the posture of a rabbi, the people hold their breath. This is not a new law from a fiery peak. It is a word from a Galilean carpenter who speaks with an authority that silences the wind. The first word, blessed, makarios in Greek, does not mean happy as we think. It means divinely favored, the one whom God singles out for grace. And with this one word, Jesus turns the world's values upside down. The poor, the mourners, the meek, these are the favored ones. The crowd must have felt the ground shift beneath them. Everything they believed about power and blessing was being rewritten in a single breath. You have seen them printed in ornate letters across stained glass windows in old stone churches. The Beatitudes are read as a list of virtues, a moral checklist for earning divine approval. Many Christians believe that being poor in spirit or meek earns you a place in the kingdom. This interpretation is comfortable and familiar, taught from pulpits for generations. Matthew chapter 5 verses 3 through 10 presents the Beatitudes as blessings upon specific groups. The word blessed is traditionally understood as a state of divine favor or happiness. It suggests that those who are poor in spirit, mournful, and meek are especially beloved by God. You might have heard it taught this way: be humble, be gentle, and God will reward you. The Beatitudes become a guide for personal conduct, a path to spiritual prosperity. This passive reading sees the meek as weak and the mourners as simply sad souls. It implies that suffering and poverty of spirit are virtues in themselves. But here is what most people miss. The original Greek word for blessed is makarios. Makarios was used to describe the gods, the elite, those who were supremely fortunate. It does not mean happy in a passive emotional sense. It means congratulations. When the biblical author wrote, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," he was declaring them fortunate. It is an active affirmation, not a passive description. It changes everything. Traditional teaching often misses this nuance, reducing the Beatitudes to a moral checklist. You are told to be meek and mournful, but the text actually celebrates a different reality. The kingdom of heaven belongs to these people not because they earned it, but because God declares it. The familiar reading turns a revolutionary proclamation into a pious platitude. What if the Beatitudes are not about how to behave, but about seeing the world as God sees it? The meek do not inherit the earth because they are passive, but because God fights for them. The mourners are comforted not because sadness is good, but because God overturns death. Traditional interpretation flattens the radical edge of Jesus' words into conventional morality. You have been taught that the Beatitudes are a ladder to climb, but the ladder is already down. The Greek word makarios does not describe a state of being, it declares a new reality. But here is what most people miss. The word blessed is not a description of someone, it is a declaration, an exclamation of their true condition. Traditional teaching says blessed means happy or lucky, as if God smiles on the virtuous. But makarios is a pronouncement of a new reality that already exists. You have been told the Beatitudes are a moral checklist, virtues to earn God's favor. In reality, they are an inauguration. Jesus is declaring the kingdom has come. The poor in spirit are not simply humble, they are the spiritually bankrupt, those who have nothing to offer. And Jesus says the kingdom is exactly theirs. Meekness is not weakness, it is power under control, like a wild stallion that has been broken. The meek inherit the earth because they have learned to yield. We are standing at the edge of a linguistic cliff. The word blessed in the Beatitudes is a translation of the Greek makarios, but makarios does not mean what you think. In classical Greek, it carried a weight far different from simple happiness. Aristotle used it to describe the self-sufficient happiness of the gods, a state of inner contentment that depends on nothing external. This is not a feeling that comes and goes. It is a deep-seated joy, an unshakable fulfillment rooted in the soul's own condition. Most people miss this. They read, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," and think of a divine pat on the back. But Jesus was invoking a concept from the highest Greek philosophy. He was speaking of a divine internal liberation. The Greek word eulogetos is what we often use for blessed, when it means praised. But makarios is different. Eulogetos is about being spoken well of, receiving praise from others. Makarios is about an inner state of being. Paul, in 1 Timothy 1:11, calls God makarios, the blessed God, not praised by others, but inherently joyful and fulfilled. This word appears over 50 times in the New Testament, but its deepest roots lie in classical Greek thought. In the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle argues that makarios is the ultimate state, attainable only by the virtuous and the gods. It is not dependent on riches, health, or fortune. It is a condition of the soul aligned with truth and virtue. So when Jesus opens the Sermon on the Mount with this word, he is making a radical claim. The poor, the mourners, the meek, they can possess this divine self-sufficiency, not despite their suffering, but because of it. This is a paradox that shatters human reasoning. How can those who have nothing be truly blessed? The Greek word itself holds the key. Makarios is a state that the world cannot give or take away. To the Greek mind, it was the happiness of the gods. To Jesus, it is the inheritance of the kingdom of heaven. The Sermon on the Mount is not a set of rules. It is an invitation into this alternate state of being. Each beatitude begins with makarios, a declaration of perfect joy, not a conditional promise. We are not told to earn this state. We are told it already belongs to those who are poor in spirit. This is the mistranslation that has dulled the edge of the Beatitudes for centuries. The word blessed in English feels soft, passive, but makarios is active, robust, and unshakable. It is the joy of a soldier who has won the battle, not the comfort of a child being praised. Aristotle said it belonged only to the gods. Jesus said it belongs to the least of these. This radical inversion is the heart of the sermon. The kingdom of heaven is for those who have nothing else. But the word carries another nuance, one that ties directly to the covenant promises of Israel. In the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, makarios translates the Hebrew ashrei, a state of alignment with God's wisdom. So Jesus is not inventing a new idea. He is revealing the true depth of an ancient one. Makarios is the joy of the covenant. Aristotle used makarios to describe the self-sufficient happiness of the gods, a joy that needs nothing outside itself. This is not the same as eulogetes, which means to be praised by others. Makarios is an inner state of fulfillment. Paul uses makarios for God himself in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 11. The blessed God, the one who possesses perfect joy within. So when Jesus says makarios in the Beatitudes, he is not promising external reward. He is unveiling a self-sustaining joy. You open your Bible to the Beatitudes, and a single Greek word holds the key to everything. That word is makarios. In classical Greek, it meant supremely happy, the joy of the gods themselves. Aristotle used makarios to describe the life of pure contentment, self-sufficient and full of delight. But when the Latin translator Jerome rendered makarios into the Vulgate, he chose beatus. Beatus carried a different weight. It meant blessed by God, often in a future, heavenly sense. Jerome's choice shifted the focus from present happiness to a promised, righteous state after death. When English translators came to Matthew 5, they followed Jerome, rendering beats as blessed. Blessed sounded holy, distant, something you become in heaven, not a happiness you feel now. But the original Greek makarios describes a person whose life is filled with joy and contentment. Let us quote Matthew 5:3 in the Greek itself. Makarios hoi ptokoi ton pneumatai, hoti aton estin he basile aton aranon. Now hear the common English. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Here is what most people miss. Blessed feels like a reward for being poor in spirit. But makarios declares you are already happy because you are poor in spirit. Your poverty is itself joy. The mistranslation created a passive spirituality. Wait for God to bless you later. Instead, Jesus promised an active, present happiness that transforms how you live today. Think of the Greek word makarismos, a formal declaration of happiness, like at a wedding or birth. When Jesus said makarios, he was pronouncing joy over his followers right then. The Latin beatus, however, implied a state achieved through virtue, almost like earning it. This theological shift infected Christian spirituality. Holiness became a future goal, not current experience. The Church taught believers to seek blessedness by obeying rules, not to receive happiness as gift. But the Beatitudes in Greek are not a checklist for heaven. They are a manifesto for joy now. Consider the phrase poor in spirit. In Hebrew, an awim, the humble who rely fully on God. These anoim were the holy poor. Their poverty brought them into God's abundant joy. Makarios reclaims that joy. You are happy because you depend on God, not despite hardship. The English blessed made holiness passive, waiting for divine approval, rather than active happiness. This mistranslation altered Christian spirituality toward passivity, a quiet waiting for a future reward. But the original Beatitudes call you to a life of present joy, makarios, right in the middle of suffering. Now that you know this, read Matthew 5 again. The happiness is already yours. The Greek word makarios describes a deep, present happiness, independent of circumstances. But the Latin Vulgate chose beats, meaning holy or saintly, shifting the focus from joy to righteousness. This subtle change led generations of believers to think the Beatitudes were about earning future blessings through holiness, not about living in present joy amid hardship. Matthew chapter 5 verse 3 in Greek. Makariose huptokos tu pneumatai. The English translation, blessed are the poor in spirit, misses the immediacy. Jesus said, you are happy right now. We begin with the first beatitude. Happy are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This isn't happiness because of poverty, it's the relief of admitting spiritual bankruptcy. The Greek word makarios means more than blessed. It describes a deep, self-contained joy, independent of circumstances. Imagine a flower blooming in a desert. That's makarios. Second beatitude, happy are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Mourning becomes a path to joy when we grieve the world's brokenness and find God's embrace. The Greek word pentheo means deep grief, not just sadness. Here's what most people miss. Jesus promises comfort, not escape. The happy mourner finds joy in the midst of tears. Third beatitude, happy are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Meekness is not weakness, it's strength under control, like a powerful war horse perfectly reined. The Greek pros describes a wild stallion tamed. Meek people have surrendered their power to God. That surrender brings a deep, quiet happiness, the opposite of arrogant striving. Fourth beatitude, happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Imagine starving for justice like food. That craving becomes satisfaction. The Greek dikaiosune means right relationship with God and neighbor. This hunger isn't passive, it's an active, desperate longing that only God can satisfy. Fifth beatitude, happy are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Mercy is the currency of heaven. When we forgive, we open the door to receive forgiveness ourselves. The Hebrew word chesed echoes here, God's steadfast love. Showing mercy mirrors God's own character. It's not weakness, it's the happiest strength you can wield. Sixth beatitude, happy are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Purity isn't about perfection. It's single-minded devotion, like a clear window letting light through. The Greek katharos means clean, unadulterated. A pure heart has no hidden agendas. When your heart is focused on God alone, you begin to perceive His presence everywhere. Seventh beatitude, happy are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Peacemakers don't just avoid conflict, they actively create harmony. The Greek erinopos describes one who sows peace. It's hard work, like a farmer tilling rocky soil. But the harvest is joy, and being called God's own child. Eighth beatitude, happy are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This seems upside down until you realize the kingdom is worth everything. The word persecution here is dioko, to pursue, to drive away. Jesus says when the world opposes you for doing right, you're in good company, the prophets. Each beatitude is a door into a different kind of happiness, not based on getting what you want, but on becoming who you were made to be. This is the great inversion. The poor in spirit are rich, the mourners laugh, the meek rule the earth, the persecuted inherit everything. The Greek makarios was used in the ancient world to describe the gods, self-sufficient, blissful. Jesus says this happiness is available to you right now. It's not a happiness that depends on circumstances. It's a deep well of joy that springs up even in suffering. That's the revolution of the Beatitudes. Imagine living each day with this happiness, unshakable, rooted in the reality of God's kingdom already breaking into the world. The Beatitudes are not a checklist to earn God's favor. They are a description of what life looks like when the King reigns in your heart. When you hunger and thirst for righteousness, you find that the satisfaction is not a reward, it's the presence of the one who satisfies. And the pure in heart see God, not with physical eyes, but with the heart's clear vision. That seeing is itself the ultimate happiness. So as you walk away from the mount, remember, the Beatitudes are not good advice, they are good news. Happy are you, for the kingdom is yours. Take the first one, happy are the poor in spirit. The Greek word here, ptokos, means completely destitute, a beggar with nothing. To be poor in spirit is to admit you are spiritually bankrupt. You have nothing to offer God. And in that admission you find happiness. Next, happy are those who mourn. Not a stoic grief, but a deep lament that turns into comfort. Mourning becomes a path to joy. Then, happy are the meek. The Greek pros describes a wild horse tamed, strength under control, a happy surrender to God. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, not just wanting to be good, but craving God's justice like desperate thirst. And happy are the pure in heart. The word katharos means cleansed, unalloyed, a single-hearted devotion that sees God everywhere. The Greek word makarios doesn't mean blessed as we think. It describes a deep, self-contained happiness independent of circumstances. So when Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," he's not setting a requirement, he's pointing to the secret of happiness. Poverty of spirit means acknowledging your spiritual bankruptcy. It's the first step to receiving God's kingdom and its happiness. Mourning, meekness, hunger for righteousness. Each beatitude reveals a posture of dependence that leads to joy. You see, happiness isn't found in having it all together. It's found in letting go and trusting God's provision. Mercy, purity of heart, peacemaking, these are not tasks to earn blessing. They are the natural fruit of a happy life. When you live from this place of makarios, you become salt and light to the world. Your life preserves and illuminates. Jesus says you are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Your happiness shines against the darkness. This happiness is not passive. It moves you to pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven." The Lord's Prayer is the rhythm of the Beatitudes. Each petition deepens your dependence and expands your joy. Think of a person who forgives freely. That's makarios. They are not burdened by resentment. They are light and free. A humble person who serves in secret. They have discovered the secret of happiness. Their reward is not public applause. A peacemaker in a divided family. They carry the blessing of reconciliation. Their quiet work changes everything. You can live this happiness today, not by trying to be blessed, but by embracing the kingdom life Jesus describes. Start with poverty of spirit. Admit you need God. Let go of the illusion of self-sufficiency. Then mourn over the brokenness in you and around you. That mourning opens the door to divine comfort. Meekness is not weakness. It is power under control. Like a mighty horse perfectly guided. Hunger and thirst for righteousness becomes your deepest desire. Not just being good, but seeing God's justice flourish. Mercy flows naturally when you know how much mercy you have received. You become a channel of grace. Purity of heart means single-minded devotion, your whole being focused on God. That is where happiness lives. Peacemaking is the climax. You become a son of God by bringing shalom, wholeness, and reconciliation to a fractured world. This is not a checklist, it is a way of being, a posture of the heart that aligns you with God's kingdom. When you live this way, Jesus says, "Rejoice and be glad. Your reward is great in heaven." That is the promise. So stop trying to earn blessing. Start living the happy life. Let each beatitude reshape your heart and your actions today. Matthew chapter 5 verse 12. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. That is the final word. You might think this happiness is too hard, but remember, it's not a performance. It's a gift of grace through dependence. The Beatitudes are not a ladder to climb. They are a foundation to build your life upon. Start today. Let the happiness of the kingdom fill your life. Be salt, be light, be peace, and your life will become a blessing for others. So what does it look like to live this happiness? Jesus says you are salt and light right now, called to preserve and illuminate the world around you. Your peacemaking, your humility, your dependence, these are not passive virtues. They are active ways you bring the reality of God's kingdom into everyday moments. And when you pray the Lord's Prayer, you are asking for this very reality. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus ends the Beatitudes with a promise. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. Matthew 5:12.